Thanks very much, and thank you for being here and doing this keynote with us. And I think the title of the session obviously goes through navigating through change. And if you look at the entire session today, but even yesterday a little bit, it is clear that Europe is in a moment of transformation that is certainly clear in so many ways. But I wonder, the first question, if I may ask you, and it's a bit of a personal question, but you and I were speaking behind the scenes, and you kind of suggested, when you talk about navigating change, sometimes you have a CEO that decides to take a risk and will bet on someone that maybe doesn't seem the obvious person for the job. And maybe that was you in this position as global head of financial markets. So I wonder if, before we get into your strategy, you could explain more about you.
Sure. Yeah, and that indeed is the understatement of the century. So this story of mine started at the end of 2019. When I was running a big client coverage unit covering the institutional clients for ING. And as an internal client, I observed that the performance of the financial market business was, at least in my view, not up to standard. And I was quite vocal that if it would be internally perceived like that, there was a high likelihood that externally there could be a similar view. So I got a call from Steven van Rijswijk, the CEO of ING, to invite me over, and in that conversation I had with him, he basically convinced me that he wanted an outside-in view to start a turnaround of this business, where the client-led part really should have been the driver. But it goes without saying, it was quite a gutsy move, because financial markets is hugely specialized as a business. So having a non-specialist at the helm of quite a critical turnaround was gutsy.
It definitely is, and I wonder, is there basically the testament to the idea that perhaps at some point, like you said, if an internal unit, and it is clear internally that it's not functioning to the way it could be or achieving the performance that it could, at times you have to say or think, you have to bring in someone external, basically. It needs a fresh perspective and a different set of skills, perhaps.
Yeah, that was thinking, yeah. So I was given carte blanche to basically compose my own team in order to safeguard the risk part and the specialist part, but then have a complete open view on how to turn it around.
And you talked about your strategy, and you mentioned your team, and we're going to talk about this later, but I wonder, ING is a bank and an institution that has a very particular DNA in terms of the way that it is perceived, in terms of how big it is in some jurisdictions, in the psyche of some countries too, but obviously you're not pretending and you're not wanting in some ways to compete with a Wall Street bank. That's not who you are. But at the same time, and you alluded to this, it was a moment of change in this particular division too.
Correct.
So what type of change are we talking about?
Yeah, so to put it in context, the financial market business, when I was asked to have a go at it, was in a bit of a disarray. I mean, we were coming out of a period of low volatility, so there was pressure on revenues. The returns were really substandard. Equally important, or maybe even more important, the morale in the unit was quite low. So basically, you're right, we're not a Wall Street bank, but it's a sizable business, and ING is well known for its geographical footprint, for highly specialist lending capabilities, but we also need a market unit to diversify the income there, and hence I was asked to come up with a strategy for the unit.
And in this idea of your turnaround and your vision, and you also told me that last week you had been to Saudi, that you have obviously 4 different locations in the world that you go. You mentioned London, New York, obviously also spots in Asia. In your strategies, you look at it, and now that you've been for, well, not a significant amount of time, but obviously enough to settle in now, begin to change things. How would you say the strategy is paying off now?
Yeah, so the real tricky part when I joined was that I had to do so many things at the same time, right? So basically a number of pillars had to be executed, and it started off actually with the people part, and that sounds like an open door, but I think many people forget in these big transformational stories, it's very difficult to impose it from the top and then get the buy-in. So I had to basically create awareness. I had to bring the whole team along in that journey, if you like. And I mentioned before, we're known for our geographical footprint. A market business, rightfully so, by definition is very functionally driven, but I wanted to restore the balance in our decision making in the market business to reflect the importance of the regions a bit better. So I changed my management structure, I took some people actions, I changed governance, and I had to show that I was serious, right? From literally the first month, I took these actions basically to set the tone that we were going to be moving into this direction. And maybe interesting to know anecdotally, I think it was 1.5, 2 years down the road when I was asked to report back to the executive board and the supervisory board. The first thing they asked was about this people part. We have this metric in ING measuring engagement. It's a McKinsey tool called the OHI. And when I entered this business, it was the lowest of the whole bank. And at that time,
it was the worst division.
The worst division in terms of engagement and morale. And at the time of the feedback session, we were the highest of the wholesale bank. So apparently that part of the transformation did work. And I still believe that has been crucial.
And that part, to me, is always very interesting because, of course, when you talk about the banking world and overall just finance in general, the idea of talent always comes up. And it's a very competitive market, not just as you say financially in terms of compensation, which obviously it's a big part of it, but also in terms of the performance of a unit and how they feel they're better treated. And ultimately there's a question of, am I going to work better somewhere else, not just financially what they pay me, but in a team that actually works and has an idea? How important was it for you to tell your guys basically that things are going to change?
That was crucial. It was super important. And again, it sounds like open doors, but the sense of belonging, the collective drive to go after a certain goal, especially coming out of a unit where there was no direction. So that part of executing the strategy was crucial. And then, of course, I had to do all the content-driven elements, right? So despite the very good work ING does in being digital, in the retail side, we discussed that before, unfortunately, in the financial market domain, there has been really a backlog in investments, and there was no real digital strategy. So that's another thing I immediately started doing. So we designed and started executing a digital strategy, and that was really basically catching up with the market, and I was really focused around data-driven knowledge and dealing with your clients, improving the customer experience there, but also being quicker on the ball in terms of pricing. And maybe to give an example, in the FX businesses, which are very, very speed-driven, we now can basically reprice on the back of market events within 30 milliseconds. And that maybe doesn't say much for the audience, but if you realize that blinking your eye is 250 microseconds, so that means if you blink your eye now, in that time of blinking your eye, I could have changed my pricing 8,000 times in order to be up there with the market. The danger always in programs like this is that you stay too long in a project status. So on the digitalization phase, given the fact that we really delivered within the 3-4 years where we're doing this now, on 95% of all the deliverables, we moved it now from project into business as usual.
Right, so it was a question also about the internal utilities, perhaps, that they could...
Yeah, well, so that's the third pillar, the internal utilities, by far the part which was out of my comfort zone. Because you rightfully said we're not a Wall Street bank, but we're quite sizable. So we're too big to be small, but also too small to be big. So carrying a financial market infrastructure is an expensive hobby and has become, over the years, hugely complex. So I had to find a way to simplify that. And then there's basically two options. You either build it yourself or you look for 1 or 2 vendors who can help you. And as I said, that was really out of my comfort zone because it's very IT-driven. So we engaged a consultant. We worked with them over a period of 6 months. And the end conclusion there was that we actually decided to do a mixture of both. We were building a large part of the risk-taking and position-keeping part in-house. And we're using one vendor to do the client interaction. The reason being that I don't want to go purely to vendors, and I don't want to offend anyone in the audience, but vendor dependency is not a nice thing to be in. And again, all the big banks do everything themselves, but I had to make that choice of this mixture.
And you mentioned the clients and your client relationship in a business like this, in an industry like this, that personal relationship, it's incredibly important with your clients. And a lot of that is at play with whether the clients want to share your vision or not and stick with you. So I wonder, for you, how did you try to change that? And where would you say this rapport with clients is going, and what's changed and shifted?
That's a very good question. And if you look at the client interaction, there's two blocks. There's the really bespoke business where there's human interaction. And there, over the past 3 years, we upgraded the sales teams to be able to really deliver on what client needs. And then you have the more flow-driven part, and that's where the digitalization kicks in. So clients that are not really interested in the service, but they want to have speed, best price, best execution. And that's where we had to invest big time. But the overall program and the strategy of the overall program is really catered to the fact that markets change, right? And clients have developing product needs. And with this setup, I'm more agile to really deliver on that and also quickly bring products to the market.
And is there something that in your perhaps two-way conversation with clients made you go, there's something changing. They want something different. Maybe we also have to adjust to a number of things. What do you think at this day? And it's a big question. And of course, it depends who your client is and what they want. But is there something that you say, when you look at that side of the business, there's a trend in terms of the needs or type of relation they want?
Well, it's in my world, it's either clients want to risk manage their positions, be it on rates, FX, or credit, or they want to be able to get funding in a structured manner. And these are the two main building blocks. And as I said, within the flow products, everything has to be delivered quickly, on market, and best execution. And all the other parts require the creativity, which ING is known for. So.
And then speaking of that, you mentioned sort of this vision that you had and this strategy that you implemented, but you're also implementing it as we speak. It's not over. So I wonder, if you look to the medium term, again, we talked about somehow a sort of zeitgeist in Europe that is changing. There's a type of debate out there on a number of subjects. But I wonder, yours in particular, when you look at the medium term, what would you say is now something you consider this is potentially the biggest risk that you monitor? But also on the flip side, what is the thing that you go, this could be a big opportunity?
Sure. Maybe to start off with the biggest risk. And what I've learned over the past couple of years, there's no right or wrong, right? So you need to be able to make a decision. You need to stick to that decision, but sufficiently flexible to adopt a roadmap to get to the ultimate end goal. And markets change, and I doubled my revenues over the past 4 years, which helped the conversations internally, obviously, because you're self-funding this whole transition. And it's a given that at some point in time, headwinds will kick in. So the challenge is to have the institutional discipline to keep on investing, especially on the infrastructure part, so in the backbone part, because that is a 5-6 year trajectory. And yeah, that if you waver, then you jeopardize the overall program. But clearly the opportunity is, as I said, I mean, we're going to be more on the ball in terms of delivering more products. We're better in risk management. Also, regulatory requirements change. With this setup, we can be easier and quicker and cheaper compliant.
So that's for the big risk and opportunity, which in some ways are connected. It's basically what you're saying is the way that you're going to respond to it that's going to make a difference. Yeah. Well, on that note, well, thank you for this fireside questions. I know it was a lot in 15 minutes, but that was the name of the game. Thank you so much. And of course, that was Bart, who is from ING, the Global Head of Markets. And we have now reached the end of the session. So applause for you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria.